It's that time of the week again when we preview the specialist tournament for the weekend. This week we're going to be focusing on upcoming game week, which is game week number 298. First thing to note is that we are keeping hold of the same number of prizes that we saw last week, but there's quite a few teams that are actually going to be missing this weekend. If we look, there's some really heavy hitters that have been involved in midweek action that have been given the weekend off so they can fully prepare for the second round tie for the qualification of European leagues such as Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League. So that will have quite a big impact this weekend in taking out some quite strong teams out of the mix for selection. But importantly, the composition of prizes has stayed the same. So there is a real good opportunity this week, just sort of playing that edge that we have as a result of some teams like Anderlecht, Benfica. There's some pretty strong teams that will not be part of game week 298. So without any further ado, let's get stuck in. Let's have a look at the players we're going to preview this week. First up is a goalkeeper from the MLS, is William Yarbrough, who plays for Colorado. They've been, in all honesty, a shadow of the team they were last season. If you look at the scores, last year Colorado were a really strong team. There were a bunch of clean sheets, and Yarbrough put up some very, very impressive scores. This year, not so much. They have been a significantly weaker team. They have conceded a lot more goals, and that's had a real heavy hit on Yarbrough's scoring output. But if we look this weekend, they have Houston at home, which is really, really good fixture. And when you come to that under 40 slot for a goalkeeper, you just want them to play, and you want to try and avoid them conceding 3 goals. And I think Houston at home is the kind of fixture that really stands out, and Yarbrough's price hasn't really spiked up as you see with some goalkeepers that are eligible. So the fact that you can still get him for around 0.04 I think is a really, really good price, and he's definitely one player to consider. The way I think when he's described it in the past is that it's a ticket, it's your entry ticket as a goalkeeper. So Yarbrough is an affordable entry ticket who he has a decent upside. If he can keep a clean sheet against Houston, which is not out of the question, he could post a 70 plus score, which would be amazing, frankly. So yeah, he's the standout pick for me this week in terms of goalkeeper. Moving on to centre backs, we've got Attila Salazar. So rather interestingly, he is Fenerbahce, who are one of the teams who do have a weekend game, despite the fact that they are also involved in midweek. But that weekend game is Adana Demirspor at home, which is super favourable. Salazar's fixture, his scoring has been a bit hit and miss towards the end of last season, which is what kept him in this under 40 slot. But last week he put up a really impressive 62, which if you can get that from an under 40 player, you can be really, really happy. I think realistically this weekend with that, even with that clean sheet, he could be capable of going 50 plus. So he's one player to keep an eye on. Another player who really much like Yarbrough is a shadow of his former self is Felix Torres. So Torres plays for Santos, who, to be honest, when I first joined Sorare, were really, really good. They have not been really, really good for pretty much the last season. You look at the quality of what he can offer you, the scoring potential is there. He did put in a really, really good result against Cruz Azul a week or so ago and put up a 64, but there's a bunch of not so good scores as well. So there is an element of risk here, but I think his upside is pretty good. Santos are playing Club Leon at home. Clean sheet potentially unlikely considering their form this season, but you'd hope that he's involved in a bunch of defensive actions and can rack up a solid AA and put you in the mix of prizes. The next one, and this is really an interesting one really because it comes down to the fixture, comes down to the opposition. So this weekend, Aurora Reds will be playing Johor Al Tazim in the Asian Champions League, one of the big factors here, and we actually saw it today with Yokohama Marinos, is that they can only field a very limited number of foreign players. So the K-League teams will promote Korean nationals, the J-League teams will promote Japanese players. It essentially gives you a selection edge, and we kind of know that the Japanese players are going to take priority in this match in what is a pretty favourable fixture for them in the Asian Champions League. So I would really be looking at Sakai as someone that could even potentially grab an assist this weekend, just based on the difference between them and their opposition. So yeah, he's one that gets involved as a result of the fixture, much like his teammate Aratu Asaka. He again has been so hit and miss this season. He's capable on his day. He's capable of some really impressive upsides. He's been really not that good recently, but when you look at who they've played, they've had some of the tougher teams in the league, and they've played Nagoya, they've played Kawasaki Frontale. If we roll it back to the Asian Champions League games that they had earlier in the season, that's when his last big spike came, was against Shandong Taishan in the group stages. So I'd really be looking here at what can they do. He put up his best scores of the season in the Asian Champions League, so that fixture strength really does play a part. So yeah, Osaka's another wild card, just because Japanese players will get prioritised for this tournament, and they've, in terms of opponent strength, there is a good differential between Urawa and their opponent this weekend. Next up is a player who has benefited from a transfer. It seems to be a regular theme in this slot is picking players that have got a positive move and have gone from being a bench player to not being a bench player. And Jorginho Wijnaldum is one such player. He has gone to join Jose Mourinho in Roma and has a wonderful fixture this weekend against Cremonese. So he didn't start in the last match. He came off the subs bench, which, we think when he joined the team, he not had a chance to really familiarise himself yet. That's unsurprising. I think he's definitely in the mix for a start this weekend. And when you consider that is Roma at home against Cremonese, I think there's some potential here for Wijnaldum, who, to be fair, has not been a starter for quite a long time. Even in his sort of season at Liverpool, he was coming off the bench a lot. So I'm really quite excited from an SFI perspective to see what Wijnaldum can do in the game, and I think that Roma's a pretty good move for him. The last midfielder, and another player who, we talk of being a bench player for a long time, and that is Isco. Isco has moved to Sevilla. He hasn't played yet, and I will say there is probably an element of risk here in the sense that he could not start. But I think Real Valladolid at home for Sevilla, he's got a lot to prove. He was a very good player in his earlier years, but just hasn't played. I mean, look at this: it's an absolute sea of DMPs. He hasn't been getting anywhere near the Madrid team. He's got a point to prove, and I think that at Sevilla, I think this is a really good move for him. So again, like Wijnaldum, I'm excited to see what he can do. Is this weekend too soon for him? Potentially. We are taking a little bit of a risk in playing him, but next weekend is Almeria. There's one to put on your radar for sure. Depends on your appetite for risk, and I think he could be a wonderful differential this weekend if he does start. If he doesn't, I think I'll be keeping an eye on him for that slot next weekend in game week 300 against Almeria. So yeah, one to watch for sure. Next up is looking at a player from the newly licensed team. We had FC Michelin join this week, and Sori Kaba, who had previously spent some time in Belgium, has been really settling in well there. If you look at his scores, he's got 3 decisives in his last 5 games, but he is still holding on to that L15 under 40 score as a result of some pretty terrible scores at Leuven, and then he started on the bench when he initially came to join Michelin. But he really has come into his own in the last couple of weeks, and is a player that I think is really quite exciting. They've got a decent fixture this weekend against AGF at home. So yeah, one to consider this weekend for sure. The next one is a really, really intriguing one, is Kamal Soa of Bruges. So he, like Kaba, played for Leuven a couple of seasons ago and was absolutely incredible. He then went on loan to the Eredivisie last season, didn't really settle, didn't really get into the team, come back to Bruges, and to a lot of people's surprise has started the last couple of games. I think with De Ketelaere leaving, with Lang seemingly benching himself until he leaves, there has been an opportunity for Soa to step into the team, and he has really done so. He's played very well in the last couple of games, actually put up a 79 with an assist in the last game against his old club Leuven. Zulte, even when he didn't get a decisive, he still put up a 50. Like, that's really, really quite impressive in the two starts that he has been given in the last couple of games since De Ketelaere and since Lang have moved on. So keeping an eye out on him. The reason being as well is because he was a midfielder up until the new cards were released this week. So he's now got a forward card, which is really, really interesting, because he was all of his old cards a midfielder. And if you have a look at what that does, his midfielder cards actually score really, really well because of the additional defensive actions that he gets. But the forward card, if we look at it, that's what now is qualifying his entry to this underdog. So I've got him in as a striker because that is his current position. I think he could be very useful as a striker. I think he could also be very, very useful as a midfielder if you grab one of the old cards as well. So just one thing to point out, the difference in scores that you do see from him as a result of those different positions that he has within the game. Last but not least, and a player that only has a forward card, and that is Denis Dragus of Standard Liège. So Dragus caught my eye in pre-season. Ronnie Delia has come into Standard. He's really been changing up how they've been playing, and Dragus has had quite a sort of free role that plays in from the left, but is then sort of drifting into a sort of central attacking midfielder position. He loves to dribble. He loves to take a man on, and that's really giving him a decent AA. Last match against Westerlo away, Liège honestly completely capitulated. He himself had a pretty poor game with a big chance missed. But if you look at what he was able to do against Circle at home, what he did against Genk away, he's capable of grabbing a goal. He's capable of getting a decisive, and he's also got a pretty solid all-round game. So there's been flashes of brilliance. His goal against Genk was actually very, very well taken. But I think this weekend, Leuven are not a very solid defensive team. I think he got a really solid chance of grabbing a decisive this weekend. And then, you're sort of rolling off that. They've got Kortrijk, they've got Ostend, they've got St. Truden. That's like 4 really, really solid games in a row here. So I think Dragus is one of those players that you could use this weekend. You could really get the benefit from it. And then you can also sort of ride those fixtures and ride that wave and get the benefit of playing him being potentially an underdog for a couple of weeks after that. So yeah, that's it. Here we go. That brings us to the end of the preview for this week. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, and see you next time.